Good afternoon. Thank you for coming to our session on building applications with the Windows Azure DataMarket. My name is Roger Mall. I am a senior program manager on the team, and this is Christian.
Yeah, I'm Christian, and I'm also program manager on the team.
And so just to get started, to kind of understand people's sort of where they're coming from, how many people here have heard of the DataMarket?
Oh, nice.
Excellent. How many people here have actually been to the DataMarket?
Okay.
Okay, great. So just to sort of set some expectations about what we're going to talk about. The primary focus of this will actually be developing applications with the DataMarket. We will go a little bit into the marketplace and then sort of some of the business stuff associated with it in the back end of the session. So hopefully that's what you've signed up for this presentation. And with that, let's get started.
Yeah.
So to start out, I'm going to start out a little bit with some little audience participation. And what I mean by that is I'm not going to come and ask you to stand up and do something, but I would like you to start kind of put yourself in your office or your cubicle or whatever your work environment is. So imagine yourself right there. You're sitting at your desk. You've got your keyboard. You've got your monitors, your little Star Wars figures or whatever you're decorating your desk with. You're minding your own business, and then suddenly you get a call or an email from the business guy. Email, call, kind of whatever works for you. And he says, hey, can you come up to my office? I want to talk with you about something. I have an idea. And you're thinking, okay, let me wrap up what I'm doing. You come in, you just come down, sit down. Hey, what's going on? And he says, here I have my idea is if we take crime data and we get real estate data and housing data and we put it all on a phone, it would be the greatest idea. This is what we need to do. And if we do it, we'll be rich. And we'll have so much money, we'll have money to burn. So you go away going, all right, got you covered, I can do that. So you're walking back to your office and you're thinking, okay, so let's see, crime data. I've heard about the open data government initiatives. I could probably do a Bing search on this and find, data.gov. This is a United States thing that is putting crime data out on the internet so people can use it. So you go back, search for data.gov, you find this page, and you're looking around thinking, okay, so here's the data. Let's see, how do I use this data? Here on the right side where it says download, you're thinking, cool, I can download this data. And what you get is a bunch of spreadsheets. And you're thinking, not ideal for an application, but that's cool. At least it's the data. Put that to the side. I've got some smart developer. They'll figure it out. OK, next, housing data. Let's see, housing data. Zillow. That's a company in the United States that has a lot of really interesting housing data. Check out the Zillow website. So you jump on the Zillow website. You're looking around. You're looking at the Zillow site here and thinking, I don't see any developer stuff. Where are the APIs? How do I make this work? So now you're thinking, well, OK, there's got to be some data there somewhere. I've got the spreadsheet from data.gov, and there's got to be some data here. So I will just whip together my spec, throw it over to the fence to my developer, Christian, and say, Christian, here's the spec. Knock yourself out.
So the thing is, now I have a little problem, right? Because if I look back at the Excel workbook, I actually start, and actually this is something I did. I went in and I took the Excel workbook and I built a little application to get the Excel workbook into a SQL Server database. And it was working nicely. The schema was nice. I knew I had to parse out some stuff and do some stuff until I hit the state of California, because they figured out they need a different schema because they're different for some reason. And so it broke. All my application breaks, right? I'm like, I have to rewrite this whole thing. I had to do a lot of work to actually get this done, right? And I go also to the Zillow website, and it's actually really hard for me. And I can't find an API. It's really hard. I browse around, and I need an API. I need something so I can actually, put this all together. Like I have now some data in my SQL Server. Some stuff comes through an API. It's like all these different places where I need to get data. It's really hard for me to actually get build this application, and I'm still not at the place where I actually think about what this application is going to do. Like I'm not there where like Roger told me, this should do a combination of both and show it in some nice form. I'm still at this low stack where I'm still figuring out how I actually get this data in, to use it. So, but luckily I went, I was at TechEd last week and I went to the DataMarket session. So if you can move forward or switch over. I actually went there, and basically what I learned at TechEd is that there is this thing called the DataMarket. So I go to the website, and I find like a nice website under datamarket.azure.com. And there, I see actually a nice, kind of marketplace kind of experience that has like, a bunch of things that are interesting. Like it shows me, things like, learn something about data, explore marketplace. It shows me categories. It shows me some data sets. I'm like, oh, this is great. I heard from these guys, that they have this marketplace where I can actually get a lot of data that I can use and services and things that I can use to build my application. So I go around, I'm like, let's see, what do they have? I click on this browse button, right? I get like, a view of like all the data sets that are available. And for, this is really similar to like an e-commerce website where I buy stuff, right? So I get like all these data sets, I go through this, I'm like, there's like a bunch of things here, like, unemployment rates are here. So that maybe doesn't really fit what I want to do. But there's also DMB, so I know Dun & Bradstreet because my business guy told me about that, And so I go down and I find also, some United Nations data set, and I think maybe I can use this, maybe it has some crime data in there that I could use, right? I go down and check it out a little bit and find, let's say I find this, the UNESCO data set, go in there, and in this data set, once I open this data set, I see like a bunch of interesting things, I see. First of all, I see like a little bit of description and what is the thing all about. There's also information about how I can get support. So if I get stuck, I can contact the provider of the data set to get more information about it. But I also get like for developer, I also get like some kind of preview. So I see like, oh, this is really interesting. Look, they have like data that kind of like is tied to a year. I can also see like some preview. I can actually go and scroll over here and see like how the, everything evolved, and it will actually get the data and change the preview a little bit. And I get like a little bit of feeling, is this an interesting data set or is it not? And I can also go in and see like details. So this is also important for me as a developer. I see like, the first thing up there, I get like the service endpoint. So I actually know, where the service is exposed. How can I actually include this in my service? So this would be like in Zillow, I couldn't find it. Here it's right there. I get also, kind of like a schema. So I know, what's kind of in this data set, right? How is it structured? Is it something I can actually use? Additional to that, I find more information on the right that says, gives me more information about, all of these different, the metadata, like more information about the data set. So I can start, do a little bit my investigation. And I can also go and sign up for the data set. And this particular data set is free because, the United Nations said, OK, we put this out for free. Everybody can subscribe to it. They can use it how they want, and it's fine. And I can click on the sign up button and just go and, sign up for it. So what I'm asked for is like my live ID. So I just punch in my live ID. I get signed in. And what happened now, since I have already subscribed to this data set, I get like a message that says like, you have already subscribed to it. And I can just click here, and I get to a view of the data set of the same page, but now it's expanded. It has a section down here that wasn't there before, this section here basically, that also lets me do some additional things with the data sets. So if I weren't subscribed to it, what would have happened is it would have asked me to accept the terms of use. And then if there was a price attached to it, I would have had to provide my, my billing information, my credit card information, and then I was signed up for it. But in this scenario, since I was already subscribed to it, it just, let me through, and it let me, go directly to the page where I can now start working with the data set. So now I have a subscription, and now I can actually go, and what's really interesting for me now is I can use all these different tools, and it also has a section down there how I can use this data in Visual Studio. I can click on it, and if I click on it, what happens is a new tab basically opens that shows me, gives me MSDN documentation. So this is like, for me as a developer, this is great, because I get to know how to use this data set. And I can also click on this button here that says Explore this data set. And this launches basically something we call the Service Explorer, which is an in-browser query experience where I can start playing with the data set. And I go and say like, I just take, some values. I just want to see what's in here, right? I just go and say like, run a query. I just want to know what comes back. So I get like a bunch of data back. I can look at that, and it's like, oh, wow, look, they have like data from Aruba. I can actually start querying it, and things like that. So I could actually put in reference area, let's put in Australia. And I run a query, so I know, it runs the query, and I get the data from Australia back. I get I kind of start, playing with the data set, drilling into the data set, and I didn't have to open Visual Studio or anything so far. So even if I'm not the developer, I could, if I'm somebody who just wants to get to know data sets and work with data sets, this is already a good experience for me, because I can start drilling into this. I can also.
But is this what comes back from the real query?
Yeah.
What about that XML button?
Yeah, so actually, yeah, that's the thing. So this is something that we already formatted the thing, like in the payload, we formatted it into a nice table, so you can actually easily read it. But if I'm a developer, I can click on the XML button, and I get actually the payload that comes back from the service. So this is like exactly what came back, but it got translated in a table. So it's easier for me as a user to actually digest the information. It's much easier to read a table than an XML feed, basically. And the other thing I can also do is I can actually start visualizing it. So we also have some components built in here that lets me go and build like different kinds of charts. So I can build a bar chart or a column chart, a line chart, and imagine this expanding over time with more visualization functions. I can also go and export it. So if I'm not interested in using the data in here, I can go and say like, okay, look, this is a nice query, I like it, so I want to export this in an Excel file. I click the download button, and it actually puts everything in an Excel file and gives me the result, and I can open it directly in Excel. So if I'm interested, to get the data, it's really easy for me to get the data. And the experience here, compared to like going to the previous website, data.gov, is that this is actually something that always has a certain scheme associated. So it's not that the state of the country of Australia has now a different schema than the country of some other country, the United States, for example. And now, since I'm a developer, I also get the query. And so this is actually basically the query that got executed. I can copy and paste that and use that directly also in the browser to get the same payload back, or I use it directly in my application to actually build, a little application that gets this data in and does something with it. I see also the different parameters. So there's, for example, reference area in here and says Australia. So I could just swap that out and have the user pick the country or something. So that's really easy to start. It's an HTTP request. You get some data back. You parse some XML, and you have the response, and you're done. So, but now let's actually jump back to the presentation, because I want to give you guys a little bit more of an overview of what I learned. Additional to that is I also learned that the DataMarket APIs are all OData based. So all of the APIs that you see for all the data sets in the DataMarket are exposed as the same protocol. So you learn one protocol, this open data protocol, and you can access all the data sets in the marketplace, and they all work the same way. So if I have learned one data set, I can also use the other one, which makes it's particularly interesting for this phone application, because if I get the two data sets from the data market, for me it's just the same thing. I can add as many data sets as I want, and it's not much work for me because I know how to access one of them, so I know how to access all of them from the protocol level. And now, what this OData protocol, who actually from you guys have heard about OData before?
I have.
Okay. You too?
I've heard it.
Even the PM knows about it. So what it is like this query language over HTTP. So I usually call, for me, it's like SQL for HTTP. So I can actually execute all these queries, right? And it's a standardized metadata, which is really great for just for building these kind of generic experiences. I get all this, like all the queries are pushed in the cloud, are pushed onto the server, in this case with DataMarket into the cloud, and I don't have to worry. I just get this stuff back I care about, and not everything, and I have to process it in memory or something. It has all this server-based filtering and sorting. There's pagination, so I can actually do server-side pagination. DataMarket by default returns 100 rows, but has something embedded at the end of the page that is called the next link that goes to the next page. So it just pages through. And you could even parallelize that, so you get even more performance if you wanted to. And it's an open standard, so there's a lot of different libraries for like PHP, C#, of course, Objective-C, Java, and many more that you can use. And there's more and more coming online. There's a community building these libraries, and you can actually imagine just the sky's just the limit right now. And the response comes back as an Atom feed, which is standardized feed. Actually, when you open an OData feed in a browser, you get the view as if it's like a news feed. And you can also query and ask for a JSON feed. So if you build something in HTML5, you can say like, oh, give me JSON back, right? And you get the JSON back, and it's like something that's natural and native to JavaScript. Authentication is something that's a little bit different than, standard OData doesn't have a standard authentication model. What we support is we support basic authentication, and we have something that's called an API key, an account key. So you can just use it as a secret that you embed in your app, and it just like executes the queries. You send it with the query, and then you get the payload back. And we introduced a couple days ago actually OAuth 2.0 support. So you can enable scenarios like what you see on Facebook or on Twitter, where like a third-party application can use somebody else's account to actually access the data, but that person has to authorize that application to do so, and they can revoke access whenever they want. So they can say, oh, this application has no access to my data anymore because I don't trust it anymore. Or they get like a nice UI that you as a developer can embed, and it shows that you want, it's like a consent UI that you actually authorize the application there. And this also shows you what rights the application gets or is requesting for. And then, how does it work? So now, I have like a little bit background. I know everything is OData. It's easy to use. I had a little bit of an experience of going through the DataMarket. And now I wanted to start to build a small application, right, to see how this actually works. Which one are you? See? OK. So I'm still here. I want to, I think, given, that I need some crime data set, I'm going to, browse a little bit more because it seems like the UNESCO data set is not the right data set for me. I go and I'm like, what could work for me? So I go down to the publisher section here on the left side, and I find the government of the United States of America, which, is kind of like, maybe that's data.gov. Oh, look, there's data.gov there. And I found a nice crime data set that gives me some crime for the last couple of years. And I click actually on it, and I have already subscribed to it, so I could subscribe to this. The subscription here is also free, because the government wants to give the data away for free. And I can actually also go in here and explore the data set. But what's interesting for me is something here on the side, on the right side. It says like, for .NET, if I want to use .NET C#, I can just use add service reference in Visual Studio to create a client object model. So this is something that you might also know when you know data, that you can just add a service reference, and then it automatically creates the whole object model for you. So I go down there, go a little down, and go to details again, where I find the schema and all the developer-related information. And I'm like, there's like this service root URI, so I just take that. So if I'm familiar with OData, I know if I use that, I can actually do, it actually creates the object model for me when I use that. I go to Visual Studio. I create a new project here. Let's just create a simple project for now. Create a console application. It's called console application. I'm still in the mode where I'm exploring, right? So I'm not building the final app yet, but I want to just understand how this works. So I go here. I have Visual Studio open here, and let's bump up the font size a little bit, just a tiny bit. Here you go. And I click on, I right-click on references. I add the service reference here. I paste in the URL. So this is the URI that I got from the website. I click on the Go button, this is like standard procedure, right? For SOAP-based services, REST-based, OData-based services, it just goes out there, goes to the data market, gets the metadata back, and then it actually created the object model for me. So it actually creates this container class that is kind of like a context that you run the queries against, and it creates this city crime entity, which is basically, if I jump back here really quick, it is basically this table that I see down here. So it creates the table like an object for the table for me. Click on OK. Like the OData integration in Visual Studio does its magic with adding a lot of references or a couple of references. And after that, I can just go and start working with it. So let's go. I want service reference. I need this container. Let's call it context. Create a new instance of that. And OData actually wants me to pass in the service root. It says that there in the tooltip. Because what it did actually is it created the object model, but that object model works against any service that exposes the same object model. So I need to give it the URI so it knows, oh, I go against this URI to actually get the data. So I put this in here, and I think I missed the URI thing here, so I just and now what I could do is I could start building the query. But since DataMarket wants to know whether I actually subscribe to the data set, I have to do a little extra thing where I actually provide my credential. So go in here. Conveniently, there's like there's a property on the context that's called credential. I can just use a class that comes with .NET that's called network credential. It's in the system.NET namespace. And that network credential actually, let me minimize this here really quick. That network credential actually takes a username and a password. Let's get this here. For the username, I can put anything that I want. I put like account key here. And the password is the interesting thing. The password is actually the API key that we are going to look at and we are going to evaluate. So I go back, and I scroll up here, and I go to my account. And in my account, I have something there that's the account keys. So I switch to this tab, and I get like my account key. So this is my API key, and I can change it, and I can add more, remove them. So I can also manage them if I want. And I just copy this, in a clipboard, paste it over to my Visual Studio instance, paste it in. And now I have to actually change it because now it's on video, so probably people will use it. And I can just do, what is it from C in context dot, I got this whole object model city crime that was the entity that got created for me, and where C dot state equals, let's call it Washington here, select C. And now I built like a little query that goes, all of that query is being pushed out into the data market, results are being returned, and I can expose them. Let's add a little nice thing here. Let's not just get everything back. I just want the city. I want, let's say, violent crime, and I call it crime here. And, got it back. And now I'll just loop over it, right? This is just in query. A little bit of extra code I write really quick here. Right line. I want to city. I should have used a little snippet here, I guess. Item.city. And I get all the nice IntelliSense and everything, so it's pretty cool. Crime. Item.crime. There you go. And then I just read. Otherwise, it's so quick, we don't even see the console window coming up. And I started. And basically, if you look at this, it's if you count the lines of code, I think, what was it, like 5 lines maybe? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 lines of code that actually does something. And I have the whole, the data set in my application. So I just go, it creates the query here. I can actually hover over, which is it's one of the cool features I like a lot about OData, where they actually show the URI, so you actually get to see, what is going to be on the server, and you can actually just copy that and paste it and try it yourself, see what comes back. And then, it executes the query, gets the data back, and, if you just run through it, happens is the whole data, is now in my application. And if I compare that for a second with what Roger threw me over the fence, where he said like, oh yeah, look at this workbook and figure out these APIs, it is much quicker now. I don't have to think about all this, like, how do I get the data in a SQL Server or a SQL Azure database? How do I make sure, it's exposed on the internet, so actually maybe the application works, the phone application works against it? How do I update this data set? There's like a whole process around it that I don't have to care about anymore. What I did now is I stepped up one level, and now I'm only concerned about my business logic. Actually, I built an application now, and I'm concerned about making sure the scenario that the business guy and that Roger had actually works. That is the most interesting part about it. So now, since I built a small application, and it was pretty straightforward to do so, I wanted to jump over to... do you
have a question?
Yeah.
So, two questions.
Yes.
For this URL, is it for all the data set? Each data set will have Azure URL? Or?
So the question is like, I assume, let me just remove the highlighting here for a second. I assume what you're saying is like, is this URL the same for all of the data sets, right?
Is it all the data set will have its own URL?
Yes. So each data set, if you look at that, actually, if you look at the highlighted URI, it all sits on api.datamarket.azure.com / and then it's like the name of the content publisher, like the person, the company who has the data, and then their data set name. It's always the same kind of structure. And we also expose a service that lets you actually query the whole catalog. You could do something like that. And also query, for example, for subscriptions for users. So we could show that in the end, like our little Excel integration, where you actually get all the subscription for user in Excel. So you can actually, you can build a really interesting, application that goes against all the services that are exposed in the data market. Are there any other questions? I think it's a good time for. Okay. Okay. So the thing that okay, let's make this a little bit bigger. So there you go. So what I'm doing now is like I did this little investigation and I was like great, everything is great. And it looks pretty nice, and it seems to be really easy to get this data in my application. So I jump a little bit here because I built now a little frame. So if I start this really quick, what I did is I actually went ahead and I built like a little Windows Phone application that the only thing I did so far is like I built the application and it doesn't load the data from the DataMarket yet. So it's a little application. I can actually click on locate me. It actually goes and uses the Windows Phone APIs to get my GPS location, translate that into an address, and then I click explore, and I have a little bit of Chrome here that shows me details for the house that's next to me or that at a certain address, and it gives me like square feet and all of that stuff, right? Bathrooms. I can go over here. You get also the price, so I get like the price. So we need to plug that in here. I get like also information around what houses around that house, how much do they cost, so I can do a little comparison here and see what's going on. And I get also crime stats. So this is the same data set what we saw right now, and I get like statistics about what's going on with the crime and things like that, right? Always bound to that specific location that I'm at. In this case, like the city. And so I did this like little Chrome, and this is just like Windows Phone basic Silverlight application. And I think there's a bunch of sessions where they go into details how to build that. But I think the most interesting part for us here is actually to go and think about how we're actually going to enrich this application to actually do something with the data market. So basically, this is like something you guys know if you built a phone application before. It's the preview of the application. You see like the example here, so you can actually you could style it to any form you want. But for this purpose, we want to go to the code behind this website, or this not website, this like page, and go down. And what I have here is actually I have like basically I have a constructor. Constructor just does like some sets up like the frame by itself. So there's like a little navigation thing where I actually get like the UI that was provided in the first page, like the city, state, and everything. I just get that off the URL that got sent to me. I have like something here where the panorama, which is the thing that was tilting, like for each of the index, I will actually, when I move to the get comparable houses, it will just call that method, right? When I go to that pane, it will show that. If I go to the crime statistics, it calls the crime statistics page, method basically. So, so given that, I also have something here when I actually load. I also go and get the property details. So this is when I go out and go and say like, okay, let's get from Zillow or from like let's get the details about the house. Let's get the bathrooms and all of that information. And now it's up to me to just hook this up with the data market. So what I have to do to make that actually happen is I have to go back to the data market basically, and I have to go and I'm going to browse and see like where are the data sets that I'm interested in. So I go down. And I know about Zillow because Roger told me that Zillow is the thing he wants to go for. So I go down here and I find like a lot of different APIs that APIs that show me different things about real estate. And for this specific scenario, I wanted to go and get the property details API. So I want to know, okay, if I provide the latitude, longitude, or an address, give me all the details about this property, including the price. So I click on that. And I'm not subscribed to that, so I click on sign up. Let me just sign up here really quick. I accept their terms of use. Okay. Click on sign up. And now I come back, and the Zillow API is in the backend is some kind of REST-based service. So we map that to an OData service. But right now we expose that as service operation in OData, which is something similar like store procedures in a database. And OData, the Visual Studio integration, doesn't support creation of, it doesn't create an object model for that at the moment. So what I can do is actually what we did to make it simple for the user to use that service, even though Visual Studio doesn't support the creation of the objects right now, is we create an object model for you and can just download that object model at the moment. You could also go and build your own. It's also pretty straightforward. It's much simpler than building, the flexible part, which is, with the link statements and stuff like that. That is really hard. But this one is much easier. So I download this. Let me save this to the desktop. Download this, and once it's downloaded, I can actually include this into my project, and I have already done that. So I have this class here. This is like the exact same class that got downloaded, and it actually contains all the methods that I can use against the Zillow API to get property details. Okay. And now what I do is I have a little cheat sheet here, because it's a little bit of code when you actually go into building the Windows Phone application. I can actually go and do the same thing that I did before. I basically go and I copy this over here. And what I do is I set up this context again. This is the same thing that you guys saw before. I use the URI. Again, I go against the same endpoint here, and you can see the same URI, API, DataMarket, Azure.com, everything is the same. The thing that I need to do, because I'm on the phone, and since there's no support right now for these service operations, I need to tell what I'm going to call. So what is the method, the exposed service operation I want to call, and I need to provide the parameters. So what I do is say okay, I want to get deep search results with this address and city and postal code, and then I actually have like the street and the zip that got passed into this page, and I use that. And I also have a little utility here that adds the user my account key, and if I zoom in here, what it does, it is like it takes this context that I passed in, and when there is when the request is being sent, it adds a header. So it adds the basic auth header. So that the nice property I showed you before with the credentials is not available on the phone yet. So I have to manually add this basic auth header, which is a little bit of work. And we have also a blog post about how to do this. So you can just go out there to our blog, which is in the resources, and you will see exactly how this works. Because I need to encode it a bit, but it's not too hard. So I add this, and this is everything. It's very similar to what I showed before. And now I can actually. This is now a little bit more more work. And I copy this in, and then I walk you guys through line by line. What happens actually is I need to do in Silverlight and the phone. I need to actually. There's no way to do, I can't do synchronous calls, right? Everything is asynchronous, so I need to use these methods, begin execute and end execute and things like that, to actually execute the query. So what I do is, I tell them, look, the UI, the endpoint, which is the URI that I had here, I want you to take this root URI that I passed in and append that method to it, And then I execute that, I get the results back. And I get the results back in this strongly typed form, where I get this deep search result entity back. So I can actually go in here and say okay, I get the first result. If I do entity dot, I get all these properties. So I still have a strongly typed object model. It's just because of the asynchronous way of how Silverlight works, I have to do a little bit extra work. I have to do this asynchronous call, but I still get everything back, so I can actually do all of the things like the last sold price, the last sold currency. So it's kind of cool, right? I get all these things, all this information, and it's not too much work. And now if I want to actually go and post the results back to the UI, I need to use the dispatcher, which actually is the thing between the background thread and the UI, and lets me do the changes in the UI. So basically what I do is I bind the result, the entity to the context in the UI, and it does the whole data binding for me because I set that up in my example. And I have also a small utility that gets location out of the street address. So I do a little bit of geocoding. That's also just a little bit of code in the background that I do. And I show my estimate panel, and that's all it is, right? So if you look at these two lines here, I actually bind the estimates page and the details page in one go, because I get both back. If you look at the entity object, we see that there's both in there, right? So if I go to entity, again, we see there's the bedrooms, and there's also the prices and all of that, and there's also where's the estimate? Somewhere down there probably. They're here. So these are the estimates. So these are the Zillow estimates, so I can just use them as well. And now, if I run the same application again, what happens is, it just runs the application. It hides my emulator. Takes a little bit. This is the first page where I do the same thing. I click the Locate Me button, or I click on Explore and enter the address myself. Click on Explore. Now it actually goes out there and does like the little work and got the data. So now it got all the data, and it got the bathrooms, everything. It got also the estimates. So it did already it did this work already for me. So it was actually pretty straightforward with a couple of lines, a little bit of asynchronous calls. I was able to do all the work that I had to do. And now I can actually do, since I did this, let's go over here. Let's close this. Let's do the same thing for comparison. So I actually go in and, it's the same method basically. We can walk through this really quickly as well. Let's go over here. So here, again, I create the context. I provide the URI. I specify what service operation I want to call, which parameters. I get actually the Zillow property ID from the previous call. So I call first to get the property that has an ID. And for this API, I actually need to, like for getting the comparable housings, I need actually to provide them the ID for the first house and then look around that area to figure out which ones are interesting around there. I just set the UI again to show some of the progress bar. I add the credentials. I begin the invoke, get the results back, and bind the whole list to the list box that shows me the comparable houses. And that's all it needs, right? Then there's a little bit of exception handling that I should better, like when I hand it over to Roger, I probably should add that, because if it crashes, right, it's not great, or it does do nothing. Now if I run this, I have the second data set in. So it's still Zillow, but it's a different scenario. And maybe Roger didn't even ask me for that, but since it was so short for me to do, I just added that. Why not, right? So I can go and say, like, I click on Explore again. It gets me the data first.
Is that scope creep?
Yes, that's scope creep. And now it gets all the houses around me, around that house, and I can now actually start comparing houses around my area, right? So now you could imagine, now I could put this on a map because I get latitude and longitude back, so I can actually build a little big map or something that shows all the little dots around me and shows me the prices and everything. And it's actually pretty much now I stepped up into this area where now, since I don't have to do much of this infrastructure work anymore, I can really focus on delivering user value.
Where's my crime data?
Well, that's still missing. So I don't have anything for that yet. But let's go back. And that's the last method I have here. And I wanted to go, this one is a little bit different because it actually, the crime data set, it let me use link statements like in the previous example that I showed. But in the current OData library for the phone, they don't have this link translation yet. I know there's some work being done on making sure that works in the future. But right now I actually have to do a similar thing again. I need to call them, okay, this is the entity. And this is actually the filter. So what I say is like, I want to filter it by state, where state equals to the state here, and city equals to the city that has been passed in, and year equals to 2008, because I just want the most recent data that this crime data set has. I add the user key again, begin invoke. I get the results back. I get the first one, and if I go into entity, you will see it's the same thing that I had before. It has the same properties. There's also violent crime in here, there's city in here, everything is in here that I had also in my previous application that I built. And then I get like the first city, and I bind this again to the data context, like the standard Silverlight thing that you would do. I would also do some exception handling for Roger, so I would show maybe a nice error message saying like, couldn't figure it out or couldn't find the city or something. And then if I ran this, I'm actually mostly done. And I can hand it over to Roger. So let's see. Wait until it comes up. Click on Explore. I get my property here. I get the worth. It gets me like the comparable houses. I can actually scroll around if I want to. And now it also gets me crime statistics. So everything, I was able to actually hook up 3 different data sets, combine them in one application, and for the user it looks like as one experience. And now what you could think about, actually, we extended this application a little bit in our team, and we added also information about, we went to Alteryx, which is another data set we have. They actually have consumer expenditure, so what people buy in certain areas, how much money they make, and things like that. So you can add that here. So you could say, okay, so how much money make people around here? We also added a data set that returned schools. So it gave me the schools and the rating for the schools around this area. So you can now start by following the same pattern. Like we followed this pattern now 3 times to get all this data. I can just replicate that a couple times, and I get the much richer experience where I have even more data in there. And we also added the favorites button, so you can favorite certain houses and watch them, and a Bing map experience where you can actually see where the house is and how to get to that house and things like that. So now it's basically you step up into this thing where you think about an experience, think about building user value versus building all this infrastructure. Think about how long it would have taken without DataMarket to just build everything that I had the lower levels done, so I could actually start building the application on top of it. And given that, I'm actually, I'm ready to hand it over to Roger and say, like, look, this is your application. I give him like a USB key. Where's my USB key? Here you go. Load it on the key, just on that one, and give it to Roger, and he has the app.
Ship it.
Ship it, right? Do a little bit of testing before that, of course.
So to go back to the slides, any questions on what you've seen?
Yes?
Yes.
How much does it cost to publish into the data model?
Free.
So anybody can put any data up there?
So yes, actually that is the next slide. Well, it's in the back, but so I'll answer directly what you were asking. Yes, it's free. Anyone can publish up there. We have a bar, and that bar is things around availability and supporting the users that you have that subscribe to the content. And the reason for that is if someone invests the time and the effort to go and build an application and they bring this application to market, or if it's the end consumer who buys the data to use in Excel or whatever it is, we want to make sure that you will have that offering available for them the whole duration of their purchase. So those are really the two bars, the availability, and the other one is the user experience, so that you'll be signing up to an SLA around how available the data will be, the number of seconds it takes to return, sort of normal SLA stuff. So to go into some of the business details, I'm only taking it from the other side, how to buy the data. As Christian pointed out, there are both free and commercial data sets in the marketplace today. The ones he showed were primarily free. The Dun & Bradstreet one that he talked about, there are a couple different levels of purchase packages there. The idea is when we work with a publisher, ultimately they own their business, but we encourage them to use the DataMarket framework to create a bunch of different offerings, so different levels. So what you'll see is for a single offering, so the Zillow thing, for example, the property detail, we encourage them to say, well, put in one that's a smaller one that can be sort of the entry level where somebody thinks they're going to use this, but they don't really know. So maybe this entry level package is $50 a month. But then for people who want to use it a lot, you're selling it to a realtor, they'll be using this data all the time. Maybe put a bigger package of 5,000 transactions at $4,000 or whatever it is. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the publisher sets that information. So the publisher sets the price. The publisher also sets the terms of use and actually describes the data. They say, here's the data I want you to expose. It can either be through an API. So the example of Zillow, as Christian mentioned, they exposed the data through an API. Mm-hmm. So we went and looked at the API and worked with them, and they said, for this offering, I want these fields queryable and I want these fields returned.
So to jump in really quick, as a content provider, you can expose the data. You can put it in a SQL database, SQL Azure, or SQL Server if we can access it on the internet. You can also have it exposed as a REST-based or SOAP-based service or an OData service. And we have the infrastructure to actually expose it, like map it through our system. So in the front end, it always looks like an OData service. So given if it's a SOAP service, a REST-based service, there's limited query functionality like on the Zillow data set. So we expose it as a service operation, which is similar to a stored procedure in a database. Basically, you have a couple parameters you can query on. The same for SOAP. But it's from the experience side of it's always OData, and it's very little change that you have to make to actually get it in the application itself, because you always get the no data object model back that you can use.
And we currently support, on the purchase side, we currently support credit cards, so that people who want to make that purchase, we process that through a credit card engine. And another thing that I was going to mention earlier, but I knew it was the last bullet, I decided to wait, is when we work with the publishers and to try and get them to put out good offerings in the marketplace, we encourage them to take advantage of our new trial functionality, which we launched last week, which basically is get the data out there, because the developers who are going to build the apps, you should not be charging them to build an application on your stuff. Let them build the application so that it helps you sell your stuff, and then charge the end customer. So that's what the trials do, is it basically is it's free access to the data. So Christian would have been able to build this with somebody who'd opted in for trials. He would have been able to click the subscribe button that said trials available, and he would have had a certain bundle of transactions or calls to the service at no cost. So that's something new that hopefully will drive some good usage. Yes?
How does that work in terms of me pushing that back down to the consumer of the app that's consuming the other?
So what you can do actually is one of the other.
First, the question was how to push the trials back down to the person who's consuming the app.
I think it's more, if I correct me if I'm wrong, but it was more like how do you actually have the end user pay for the data in the end, right? Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, I suppose so.
Yeah. So basically, through this new OAuth 2.0 thing, feature that I didn't go into details on the phone app, you can actually, what you can do is you can actually have basically a consent flow where the user signs in with their credential, and you as an app developer can say, I need this data set. And then they actually go, if they don't have an account with DataMarket, they go through the whole process in like one flow to sign up for the data set, create an account, and all of that stuff and authorize the application, which is very similar to what Facebook and Twitter and these guys do, because you need to actually let them go and they need to sign up to some extent to the data set, right? So
let's show them it in Excel.
Oh yeah, I can actually go and show you guys that. So you need to
let's break from script.
Yes.
So what's the revenue split for the publisher?
So the revenue is the content publisher sets the end retail price because they know the value of the data. So they say for this offering with these terms of use, I want it to be $100 per month, and we'll process that, we'll add on whatever tax is necessary, and then we will pay them 80% of the retail price, and we keep 20.
So what I'm doing right now, you can actually, if you want to just switch back, but I don't have the Excel add-in installed at the moment, so what I'm going to do is actually I just go and download the thing. What you can do, to do the same what I'm doing, you just go to the DataMarket website, and on the first page you will have this big banner that says Excel add-in. Here you go. Click on that, and you enter them on a website where you can actually download this, and it's free of charge. There's nothing that you have to pay for it. And I got that downloaded to my desktop here. So let me open this really quick. Install it here really quick. So it installs the Excel add-in. It's just a little process to go through. Just click next, 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 basically. Read the terms of use, agreement.
And this CTP2 of this Excel add-in we also released last week.
Yes.
It's a big release week for us. It is, but it's still in CTP mode. So it's generally available. The link that Christian showed on the website, that will get you straight to the download point where you can grab it and bring
actually,
it down.
just when you come in here, this big banner. Oops, just wants to be installed now. This big thing, just click on this, and it gets you directly to the page where you can actually download it here. There's like a download link here. Yes?
Yes.
Got a little bit confused on one thing. So can I, for example, if I have some purpose, I want to use the data, I want to pay the money, no problem. But can I say maybe something cannot query? For example, maybe I want to got the top 100 most expensive house in the United States. So maybe for some purpose I need to go get a whole data set. Is it possible? Maybe the data provider may be concerned. Say, if I get all data set, I don't know if there are any issue about this.
So the key issue, the question was about, if I understood correctly, was as a developer, you want to get a specific data set, some arbitrary data set, and you want to be able to put that up in the data market so that you can then consume it. Was that the idea? And the concern was about copyright issues on the data?
No, actually, I'm not the provider. Probably I'm the consumer.
Right.
As a consumer, I may want to, for some reason, need the whole data set.
Yeah.
So is it possible, say, the API can provide me, say,
You will actually see Christian with this tool that he has
Yep.
have you just installed it?
Yes.
It will go and pull down the entire data set.
So what's interesting though for a comp provider is that basically we always return pages of 100 rows, and each of these pages counts as one transaction. And when you subscribe to a model where you say, I need so many transactions per month. And so if you actually, a lot of comp providers have unlimited transactions, so you can actually just pull down the whole data set. Some of them, limit the transactions to like 200,000 queries or something per month. So you have to maybe and some have a scenario where the API is locked down. Like for example, for the Zillow API, since you need to provide the address, they don't let you download everything. In that scenario, you cannot. So there's a bunch of different things where you can do it and where you cannot. But with this Excel add-in, if I install it, if I go to the Data tab in Excel, I get this new button there that says Import Data from DataMarket with the Azure flag. And I can click on Sign In or Create Account. And what happens now is we start a little browser. And this browser basically asks me for my live ID. So the add-in itself doesn't use an account key or an API key, but it wants to use my account to actually be able to access the data. So if I go in here and type my live ID, I can click on Sign In. What happens now, it redirected me, and it has a little thing here that actually asks me, okay, look, this application now tries to get access, and these are the rights it wants, and do you want access or do you want to cancel? And I say, in this case, okay, allow access. And what happens now is that it got a token, like a key, that lets it for I think it's up to 10 minutes. The token expires after a certain time, and there's a new token that lets the application get renew the token. So it needs, after each 10 minutes, it needs to go back and say oh, am I still allowed to access this or am I not? And in the meantime, I could go back in the data market as a user, and I could say, okay, let me sign into my account here. And I can go, and as a user, can go into my account, can go into applications, and I can revoke access. So I can go and say, oh, see, this is the Excel add-in. It has access now, and I can say remove access. So the add-in gets, after a couple of minutes, it has no access anymore to get to my data. And now what I can do is I have so this goes out and fetches an auto data feed that we have that basically gets the subscriptions for the user. And I can go down here and I find all these data sets that I'm subscribed to, and there's actually a bunch. And I can click on, I find this data set from crime statistics again, and I can click on a link here that says import data, and it opens an experience that lets me actually build a little query against the data set, or I could just click on import data to get all the data in. And let's say, okay, for this demo, I limit it to 50 rows for now. And I can sort the results if I want. I can add filter statements. I can also select what stuff I want. Maybe I just don't want everything. I want the city and, let's say, population and property crime. I click on import data. It just gets the data in, and I have the data in Excel. So, yes.
Yes.
Yes. So yeah, the question is 100 rows is one transaction. So if I ask for 200, is that two transactions? And does the number of columns count in that, right? Actually, the number of columns doesn't matter. It's the rows. So 100 rows is one page, and it's one transaction. Yeah.
You only pull back 50.
I just pull back.
Counts as one transaction.
Yeah,
so it's up to 100. So on some, your query may have return one.
Okay, 250. So if I import that, now I got basically 3 transactions, because it's more than 200 and less than 300, right? So that's basically what it is. Yes.
Yes.
So, and that's cool and works well from Excel. How does that work for a mobile experience where I need to go buy
So from the mobile experience, you would have the UI would be a little bit different because it would be it needs to be rendered on the mobile experience. So due to that, the flow actually to buy a data set, if you go through the consent flow, is different than what you saw when I got to the web page. It's much more streamlined. It goes directly to the data set and gives me only the options, and I click on the options, basically. And I think it has a link to actually go more, and then it goes to the page, so you can actually, if you wanted to, you could explore it. But it's much more streamlined, because otherwise, yes, if it's just like in a browser page, that thing is really hard to use. Yeah, I agree. Yes?
Anything special in terms of integration with PowerPivot? Or?
Yes, we actually have an integration with PowerPivot. I don't have it installed on my notebook. But if you open PowerPivot, if you download the most recent version, there's a button in there, in the ribbon, in the PowerPivot window that says Azure DataMarket. And you can actually, it has a little, was it cart or something?
Yeah, like a little shopping cart icon.
Yeah, you can click on it, and what it does, it opens an experience where you can actually pull these things into. So PowerPivot is fully supported. Yes?
One more question.
Yes.
Is it possible, say, I'm thinking, yes, maybe I personally think, or my company think this is not a good user experience. Or maybe we can say, okay, we are talking to the client, or potential client, say, forget about it, you don't need to register this. I register for you, I pay for it, and then I charge you that money. Something like that. Is it possible, or a license agreement?
So technically, it's absolutely possible. In most cases, on the business side, it's also possible, but ultimately, the decision will lie on whether or not the content publisher has allowed that. So in the publisher terms, they'll say the ones who don't, for whatever reason, don't want that, they'll specifically call out, this is not a license we want to grant. Since that's limiting for a lot of the developer scenarios that we're really targeting the data market for, when my team works with content providers, so I'm responsible for all the publishers, that is one thing that when we are explaining sort of on the biz dev side, here's the opportunity. But by the way, every time you make these restrictions, you're carving out a lot of scenarios. And what you specifically asked is one thing that we do talk to them about very specifically is, look, yes, ultimately you can say there's no resale rights, it's your business, your data. But if you do that, most of the developers who want to create kind of a one-click experience for their customers, for your, to your point, and actually to kind of what the point of your question was, is once we talk to them about that and explain kind of how that works and actually show them the experience, like, yeah, okay, I see what you're saying, that makes sense. I'll grant that right.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's a decision that the provider, the publisher.
Because you could also have a model where you said, I put ads in there and get my money back through advertisement or something like that, so that is covered. You should be able to do that. Yes?
Yes. So free data, absolutely supported. The Zillow data that Christian showed, actually the UN data, that was free. I would guess, don't quote me on this, probably half
maybe
of
a little less than half. Yeah.
Half of the offerings in the marketplace today are free. They don't even have a commercial upsell, which is goodness as you're a developer. Just, oh yeah, party on, everything's free. Let's see, like Christian did in the demo, let's see what other data I can add into this app. And that's actually, that's a good point, because that's actually what we're trying to enable with this, is once you have all of this interesting data in a single spot, with a single programming model that's very easy to use to just suck in additional layers of data, that's where it starts to really open data up. And that was the original vision behind the data market. So a couple...
Yes, I was wondering, as a publisher, what are my options to change the pricing? So if I'm free today, can I change it tomorrow? Is it not free?
So the way that would work is you would create a second offering on top of that that's the exact same thing, and you would wind down the free one. Unless you wanted to keep them both, you wanted the free and the priced one, then we would add another offer variant on that.
Yeah.
So what guarantees do we have as developers that a free fee is not going to turn into a big fee tomorrow when we build like an app?
So that's a great question, and right now that's a challenge that we're working with. What I am doing is pushing into the agreements with the content publishers a notion of when you publish something, it will be open, it will remain in the marketplace for X amount of time. And then as soon as someone starts using that, you will give them a long wind down time. So you can take your content offline tomorrow, no new purchases, except for through the people who are already using it. You will support them in a wind down, even if the data is offline from the world for this amount of time. And at first, some people get it right away, and others who kind of think, well, that doesn't really give me the flexibility. And once you explain that, no, really what that does is you're giving people the surety of supply, so if they invest the effort to build an app, they'll be able to sell that app for a while and get some money and recoup their cost.
And right now, it's also interesting when we look at the comp providers. We have now, 91 offerings in there, DataMarket. We haven't seen any doing something like that because they also have an interest to sell their data or to get a user base basically that people use their data. And what's more happening is that there might be a new offering that they provide that has maybe a little bit more data, and they make you pay for that, or they started with you can actually specify the number of transactions a user can make and the price, and they said okay, 50,000 transactions is free, that's fine. And then over time, they add maybe 100,000 transactions and put a price there, so you still keep the 50,000 there, but they add another layer. So if you because they figured if you're somebody who is not a big enterprise with 50,000, you're fine, right? So that's more they want to keep. They don't want to scare people away. That's a lot of these guys have been in this business for a while, and they know how to make sure customers didn't get scared and run away. Yeah. Yeah.
That's exactly how the model works. The framework was set up specifically to support that, so that you could go in, connect to a single data set in the back end, either in SQL Azure, we take a connection string or API, and then you can set your SKUs, if you will, on top of that without having to expose a bunch of new data things. As the publisher, you're just saying, okay, for this subset of this data plus these terms of use, I want the price to be this.
They tell us that?
As part of our publication process. Yeah, as part of the publication process, right now we have a questionnaire that asks all these questions as the marketing stuff. How do you want to describe this? What are your sales, collateral? But then we have a couple sections on the technical where you tell us, here's what my data is, here's how you here's how you connect to the data, and here's what I want. Here's how I want it exposed.
We tell you.
Yes.
Yes.
Here, and then you guys do the physical.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
And then we map it and build the APIs on top of it.
We build a little mapping layer. So why I asked Roger to switch back is actually if you look at these two offerings there for tobacco, they say point of sale and extended. The point of sale one exposes a couple of columns, and the extended one exposes all the remaining columns that he had in the database, and it's the same database in the backend. So that you get the flexibility to say, you get even more flexibility, which is kind of interesting. As a comp publisher, you can also specify which columns a user can query on and which ones are only returned. So I can say, okay, these 4 columns you can query, and but there's so you can even tweak there if you wanted to. And as a developer, it's you look at the offering, and if it makes sense, right, it makes sense. And you can always go and click on the support link inside of an offering, for example here. And if it doesn't work, you just get support for this offering and tell the guy, look, maybe if you expose these other columns, right, then we could use it for these kind of scenarios and work with the comp provider.
Yeah, and actually we have gotten some of that feedback. And a good example is if you go and pull up all Dun & Bradstreet. Yeah. Dun & Bradstreet's a great example where they were interested in being part of this. And so they rolled out something small right at the beginning. But since then, they've gone with, I think, 3 other sets of offerings where if you scroll down, you'll just see there's a lot of stuff here.
Yeah, you see the dates.
And as they've gotten further and actually gotten feedback, as Christian was saying, from the world saying, this is great, but here's what I want, they've been very, very interested in how do I manage this channel and started to configure offerings specifically for this channel. Yeah. Yes, you had a question. So that's a great question. The DataMarket itself is not about data storage. So we are the billing, provisioning, the OData, all that stuff that goes on top of the data. So if you put your data up into SQL Azure, then Microsoft makes money. That's standard SQL Azure. So I put on my Microsoft hat, and Microsoft makes money. If we're connecting to a web service, then obviously you have costs exposing that web service and bandwidth and all that fun stuff. But from the DataMarket perspective, we're not charging for the free offering. So from our perspective, we don't make money, but there is other business value we accrue from that. If there's a lot of really interesting free data, like the Zillow data, getting people into the marketplace to start consuming that and exploring the different data sets, there will be, and we're seeing this, where we're starting to see the attach to other data sets where, again, going back to Christian's example of the business requirement was just show me the property information and crime information, but while he was there, he found, well, there's the comparables and other stuff, and if I throw this in, I can make my offering that much better. We can, but that's not really what our intent is, because if someone can meet the bar of the availability and the things that I mentioned, like no third-party infringement, then I don't know what good data is. And for me to sit and judge, well, this data is bad, so I don't want to put it up, that doesn't mean anything because I don't know that data. There may be all kinds of people who would take that data, even though it seemed bizarre to me, and use it in all kinds of new ways. So it's not really, we don't really even want to be that judge.
We have like one data set that's the death index, like people who are dead, basically. And you're like, that's bizarre, right? And maybe we shouldn't post it, but like for credit card companies, that makes a lot of sense, Or like even for points of sale, right? I mean, just look whether the credit card is maybe some dead people who belongs to, things like that, or like AT&T or some companies. Makes a lot of sense to do checks like these. So.
Or you can build an apartment finder app.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. You had a question? So we do. Well, so on the ethical side, so there are, as part of the agreement, there's a code of conduct and content stuff where it'll basically say the content, you are signing up to content that is not offensive or, the usual. Yeah, we actually thought about having more of a objective bar of it must be good, where good is defined as, the top 10 bestsellers in this vertical or whatever. But the problem with that is, so what if a guy comes out, he's just starting, and he actually does demonstrably have better data, but it just doesn't meet whatever our bar is because in his industry space, data is not good, data isn't measured that way. So some of the early feedback from our CTP was, let me decide if the data is good. What I want from you is I want to make sure that when I sign up to it, I'm going to be able to use it. And I want to make sure that the experience with that will be good. It'll come through, the queries will be fast and sort of, so I can use it in my app. Let me decide if the data itself is good or bad. Mm-hmm. And that made a lot of sense to us, so we went that way.
That's what I was kind of more getting at. Do you care how many people are going to be interested in this? Do you look at it from that end? Or if I say, hey, I've got information on it, I've got a ton of data, but I don't know if anybody's interested.
So we don't really care, but since we are relatively new, we launched our V1 at PDC last year. We do want to get data that's going to drive interaction. So one of the things that we look at, I'm not going to push somebody out, but at the same time, when we engage with a publisher and we're getting ready to publish their offering, we do look at that from an end-to-end scenario, starting with the end consumer, to make sure that the offering you're putting in, is there someone who's going to be able to use it? So I'll give you an example. We had some publishers at the beginning who put data in that was clearly commercial data, and the very first bullet on their terms of use said, not for commercial use. And so as we were looking at them, we're like, great, your call, but you realize no one's going to be able to use your data. And they're like, well, why? I don't understand. Well, look at your terms of use. And they hadn't really thought about it from sort of the back end of, okay, can the consumer use this? Now let's go up a level to the developer. And this is where most of the content publishers don't actually, that's the piece they miss because they don't generally have this third-party developer ecosystem. They usually have their direct sales force that goes out and does all their stuff. So as you're talking to them about what is a good offer, helping them see the ecosystem from your eyes as the developer of here's what a developer needs. Getting an example is the free trials. They're thinking, well, why would we give our data away for free? And then as they understand that, oh, the developers, they're not going to pay to build an app, but they are going to build a really cool app that highlights your data, that will drive usage, and like, I get that. And so that's part of our publication on the biz dev side, where we get them to really think about the scenarios in a new way, and then that encourages them to put the right terms of use into the offering, or the right types of data, the right types of queries, so that you can consume it in a meaningful way.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Bet.
Did you put any thought into, let's say, I have a company and I sell software and some standard set of data that, my software would essentially use, and having some kind of way of putting it on the DataMart and having some type of way of saying, well, really, it's really not public. Kind of like for a company to be able to use the DataMart as a repository, a central place to for our software to get it from, or our customers should actually use the framework, but it's not actually exposed to the public.
Yes, and this is a piece of feedback that we got early on. And one way to look at it, to rephrase, I think your question was, it's not the data that you want to expose as much as the application that consumes the data?
Both. I guess what I'm saying is that the data is not necessarily for public consumption, but for my customers, my particular customers, that information makes sense.
Okay, so sort of a closed ecosystem, people who can consume it.
We want to use your framework.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
People want to use your data.
Yep.
Yeah, or within an enterprise.
Yep. So having the closed ecosystem of either my partners, my affiliates, my business groups, and my enterprises, this actually is probably in the top 3 piece of feedback we're getting. So we're looking really hard at this and trying to figure out, okay, how can we deploy some additional features in this that will answer those needs, because a lot of the provisioning pieces in the DataMarket would support that, but we're trying to balance that with, do we want to fragment this out and make this sort of a private DataMarket rather than the public marketplace? So we haven't quite figured out the right way to do that, and if it makes sense to do that, but it is absolutely one of the things that we're thinking really hard about.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would actually, after this session, I'd like to kind of get details from you on,
We should chat a bit, right?
I got a question about next page.
Oh, this.
No. The next slide.
Next slide. I'm stealing it away. This?
Yes.
So, does it mean only this country of user can use the data, or?
No, what this means is this is for commercial, where we can process transactions, so we can accept payment. We just expanded outside the US as part of our last week's release. For the free data, that's available. It's open today wherever you are. You go in, you accept the terms, and
You can just use it.
use it.
So if I have a customer from Russia, is the BGK, and but they cannot pay, then we pay for them. Is it legal, or is there any problem?
So it's whether or not the content, ultimately the decision rests on the content publisher. They can say in their terms of use, not available for people outside of or in this country or this region, where they may have licensing or other restrictions for distributing their data in those countries. So they call that out. But from our perspective, the platform, the DataMarket platform, for free data sets, we don't have any restrictions like that at all.
So what's the challenge with onboarding everybody for commercial use?
Publishing the data for commercial use? I'd say the challenges were and are really streamlining the publication system until it gets to be as much self-service as possible, but we still want to have probably some sort of a layer to ensure that we have that quality bar, so someone doesn't just say, yeah, I support this.
Yeah, no, I mean like in terms of consuming it. So just these 9 countries, why not everybody can pay?
Oh, commercial stuff globally, lots of challenges. Tax is the biggest one, how different regions use tax. But there's also things around for reporting and reporting back to the content publishers, who their customers are, there are privacy implications.
But we are actively working on expanding this list. That's why the last bullet there says like more soon.
Imagine there's a lot of countries that have political reasons for not.
It's a fun project.
So I see a question back there.
And we have the red light, so
What type of data sets are you supporting? Are there any specific data sets, meaning data types, do you support only like the RDFs or the ACSVs? What kind of data do you support?
So when it comes to getting the data as a content publisher, right now what we support is the data delivered to us like in a SQL database. So if you put it in a SQL database, that's fine, SQL Azure. Or you expose it through a REST or SOAP-based service to us and use the types that are available there. Or no data, data service works as well. So if you have a no data service or something, they put on top of a database or something or any store, that works for us. REST SOAP works as well. SQL Azure is the one that gives you, or data gives you like the flexible queries that I showed in the first example. And with the other ones, you get service operations. But that's what we support right now. And we are also, thinking about maybe being able to process CSV files in some form that you can maybe upload them or some things like that. But it's a little bit out. Yeah. Thanks.
all right. Thank you very much.
Thanks. So, yeah.
And if you have additional,
Thanks.
thank
So
you.
if you guys have any additional questions, we actually are down at
here a little bit.
the Windows Azure booth, just down where the cloud stuff is. There's like a SQL Azure, Windows Azure booth, and we are at that one. So just come by, and we will be there today and tomorrow. So
We'll be here all week.
yeah, all week. Yeah, we're both there all the time. So if you want to come by, just come by.
Thank you.
Discuss details. Thanks.